you get in trouble at area is if you're a BS artist, because we are professional investors.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a shouting culture. It's not a. I mean, Deborah Felix should answer that question because she's hired most of the team, and she knows the type. It's even personalities who get along with people, but team players. So I would say my managerial
And high intellect.
is fair, and I'm not a shouter. But I don't like sloppiness. I don't like sloppiness. You know, we're not cowboys. We invest people's money. We invest our own money.
Yeah. I think you probably summed it up best without knowing you too well, but by saying come to me with the big problems or with the small issues. So this is more of a delegate until it's important.
But it takes up it takes up an inordinate amount of time, and I think it's important. The thing that is important is to take the guys out, each one individually. You know, I've got 3 children, and you think family time is everyone doing something together, but you have to actually take each one of them out and do something, because they have their own needs, and what you experience as family time, they don't experience as family time. It's the same thing with a team. I'm not saying they're children, but you know, it's great to have the summer outing and go to the races in Goodwood and all that, but actually there may be that vice president who's really had that issue that they've wanted to talk about, they haven't had the gumption to do it, and if you take them out to the local Starbucks or for a bite to eat, it's usually the throwaway line as the check is being paid, and that's the one you have to listen to.
Yeah. What advice would you have to some of the younger members of the audience here who are considering or already pursuing an early career in real estate?
I'm so sorry, I got my back to the... Don't think of it as a get-rich scheme. The money will follow a job well done. Think of yourself as a craftsman. If you're a building surveyor, be the best building surveyor you are. If you're on the finance side, get the best deals possible on the financing. Focus on the job well done. Make sure you're fairly treated, that you're rewarded for your efforts. But the people who strike it rich and the dramatic success stories are statistically very low. So don't make that your aspiration. But it will come. Cream will rise. I mean, we hired a fella to be, he didn't have to be, we hired somebody to be a compliance officer because we're FSA. And I just noticed that every time there was a problem in management, he volunteered to deal with it. He solved it. So he's the COO now, from hero to zero. If you're good, you'll be noticed, but focus on the job, not on the dream. That would be and most importantly is know the assets. I mean, if you're on the finance side or the tax side, you're not going to walk the real estate. I came up through the banking side. I was not a surveyor, but I think if you can manage a building, understand what tenants want, site selection, from the building out, not from the spreadsheet in, so that you really have a feel. Understand how they operate. The finance will come. That would be my advice. Having, of course, done the exact opposite.
So now maybe some questions. I think we spoke quite a bit about property, and if anybody has more questions they want to ask about real estate, what they can have.
You mentioned earlier that some of the institutions in the US, like Calvus Counselors, are reducing the number of managers they're using, which is correct. And you also mentioned that it's getting harder to raise finance. What do you see happening with the fund managers, sort of in the UK and Europe? Do you think there's going to be further contraction?
If you were at Harvard Business School with Porter, you would be talking about industry consolidation. It's not so easy because they're all managing existing funds. That money's sticky and they have to be worked out. So there are enough management fees for a while to keep everybody going. What will happen is there will be further mergers, there will be some extinctions, and there will be some firms which will really go back to what they used to do, which is the deal-by-deal fundraise. Because that's almost the good news here. which is there's a lot of appetite for real estate investment. There's less appetite for the blind pool funds because the broad managerial discretion was in many instances abused in the 2006 to 2008 vintage. People put half the deal, half a fund in a deal. They gave unlimited guarantees at the fund level. They violated covenants. There wasn't prudent stewardship of capital. Those are the extreme examples, but somebody can translate. Im ish echad yechateh, al kol ha'edah yiktsof. If somebody screws up, the rest of the industry pays the price. So people will go back to syndications, and they'll have to right-size their organizations accordingly.
And do you think the regulation that's coming out of Europe now is going to completely transform players in the industry?
I think that at above a certain level, yes. Below a certain level, I think real estate is not on the radar screen of the regulators. But that's not my area of expertise.
So maybe now moving a little bit to your, as you were introducing the three bills, so to bill number 2, and a little bit more about your Jewish life and your involvement in the Jewish life. You support the UGIA or the president. What makes you support the UGIA? What makes it different?
Well, what we do is we invest in, right, the goal of all of this, of everything, of the Center for Jewish Learning is deeper Jewish affiliation, right? When Rabbi Levy retired from Spanish and Portuguese synagogue, there was an article in the Jewish Chronicle, and the writer quoted Rabbi Levy as saying, a good Jew is somebody who wants to be a better Jew, right? What we want for our children is that they are engaged. And there are many ways to do it, right? So there's learning, there's formal education. We focus on informal education with Israel as the hook. So we twin people's bar mitzvahs with Ethiopians. We fund all the Zionist youth groups from Sinai and Ezra to FZY, so kids go on camp. We train all the madrichim for Israel tour. And we provide bursaries to 1 out of 4 children who go at age 16. That is a little known fact. If your kid is at a non-Jewish school, secondary school, and there's a Jewish society, we run it. We send 100 people a year on gap year. They become the leaders. So what we say at their trustees meetings is give us an 8-year-old, and by 23 we want to make sure they're a Zionist. And we know that it's not just as a Zionist, but that it's a deeper affiliation with being Jewish. So that's what we do in the UK, but it's the long game, right?
Yeah.
Identity is the long game. It's not a soup kitchen. It's not soup kitchens are necessary, and they're unfortunate. But the disadvantage I have is I can't, like Hillel on one leg, say this is what we do. In a world that likes sound bites, ours is a longer story. What we do in Israel is very important. We have targeted the Upper Galilee, which is the most economically challenged, demographically fragile because it's 50% non-Jewish, and we have tried and are succeeding through building education institutions to make it a place where Jews want to live. So it's about opportunity in the Galil, and it's about identity in the UK.
Interesting. I used to work with some summer camps, and I used to say that my purpose is for the kids to cheer for Israel if Israel plays in some games, not against their home country, but to have the affiliation and the love for Israel in their
It
heart.
charges the Jewish batteries. And we realize the tremendous, like this room, the unity in diversity that is the Jew. When I was 16, I went to Israel my grandmother gave me a trip as a bar mitzvah present. I went when I was 16. I went with American Zionist Youth, 2 weeks on Tiyul, 4 weeks on a Moshav. I lived with a Yemenite woman. She could not read. She had 9 children. I was the son of a doctor. She survived by selling eggs. But on Shabbat, we said the same thing. She gave me the siddur and she said, Kiddush, and I knew what I had to do. So that's what Israel does for us.
I'll ask you a hard question, which is, do you think a British Jew has the obligation to support Israel?
1,000%. First of all, there's a myth, right? Rich country should take care of itself. It has rich people, okay? But it has the highest per capita defense spending, and it does not have a social service budget that extends beyond really the center of the country. So we should wait for the Israeli magnates to build schools in the north of Israel? You know, Trevor Chin, who was the president of UJIA years ago, said it's the greatest development project of the Jewish people in 2,000 years. The work's not done. 1 in 4 Jewish kids is in poverty. There is a lack of opportunity. There are poor schools. And it is our job to continue to build the land. And we're richer for it. And, you know, God help us if we ever lose collective responsibility. Kol Yisrael Arivim Zeh Bazeh is not limited in time. It does not end in at the Yom Kippur War. It is a continuing obligation.
And you mentioned before the UGA involvement both in the UK and in Israel. How does the UGA determine the split between these two, the priorities?
Yeah, it's sort of an unwritten rule among the trustees, and it's roughly 2/3 UK, 1/3 Israel.
Mm-hmm. And as the chairman and one of the highest profile leaders of the Jewish community, which causes do you support? And how do you strike a balance between professional, philanthropic, and family commitments? It's 2 questions, actually.
Well, I support the UJIA. I support the Masorti movement because coming from America, the conservative movement is the largest denomination. It was the one that I, as a young adult, was most comfortable in. And when I came here for historic reasons, it was very small. So my wife and I, you know, have supported that. I also support some non-Jewish organizations which I think are also about tikkun olam, which are really remedying inner city ills.
Mm-hmm.
So poverty, urban deprivation. And what was your second question about juggling?
How do you strike the balance? Because again, you're the head of a large private equity company, you know, and you came from banking, and you have a successful family and a successful philanthropic career. How do you balance these three?
It's
bills.
difficult. My wife rolls her eyes a lot of times. Well, Shabbos is a beautiful thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Right? The Shabbos kept the Jews more than the Jews kept Shabbos. So I would not present myself here as a halachically Shomer Shabbos Jew, but we are together Friday night. I do not work. I do not click the computer on. And that is great family time. I don't work on the weekends unless it's an emergency. And you know what? You steal islands of time. I go to Chumash Club Wednesday mornings with my son, and I see Alan Sampson there. I'm going to take my middle boy to Golders Green for a dinner tomorrow night to just catch up. You can find, a busy person can find the time. It's about awareness.
Yeah.
It's about checking in and just touching base.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I need an 8th day of the week. We all need an 8th day of the week.
No, I think the point about Friday evening and Shabbat is a very strong advantage for a Jewish working person, because it actually allows you to free the time to the family if you're dedicated to it.
Yeah. I have my parents to thank for that. We were always home Friday night.
Yeah.
Always home. And as a teenager, if there was a party, or you wanted to go to a movie, my parents didn't say no, but you always got that uncomfortable look,
Yeah.
which we've perfected.
They say 2 Jews, 3 opinions, 5 charities. Do you think there is value competition, or do you think it's better for the community to join its resources? It's a business
It's a very
charity
difficult
together.
question. I will tell you, on the one hand, you know, to paraphrase that great Talmudic scholar, Chairman Mao, right? Let 1,000 charities bloom, right? On the one hand,
Yeah.
you think it's a sign of communal vitality. Interestingly, the UK compared to in the US, Charity has, until recently, been more centralized through the federations. You gave to a federation, and it allocated between local and global Jewish needs and Israel. Religion was decentralized. There's no chief rabbi. Here, religion is more centralized because of the chief rabbinate and the United Synagogue, but charity is very decentralized. And I personally think that we are sapping the vitality of the community by too many charities. The community is picked over. People roll their eyes. There's a limit to the money. And I think what people have to sort of think is, this is a good idea. Is there an existing organization to do it? Now, I got a letter, and I'm sure it was a great letter from the chief rabbi saying, I want you to meet so-and-so. They're taking up the cause of Brit Milah, like Shechitos. Now, Brit Milah is very important. So somebody's going to come visit me. I'm sure they're lovely people. They are lovely people, but they're going to need money. So between a board of deputies, a Jewish Leadership Council, all the synagogal movements, we can't, the Stanmore Accords, which is where all the denominations, we can't, in the existing infrastructure, tackle Brit Milah advocacy. We have to use the existing infrastructure. Because every charity has a back office. Every charity has a paid or semi-paid professional. So if the Anglo Jewry raises 300 million pounds a year, and the average overhead load is 15 to 20%, that is a lot of money that could be going into the front line. So I think we've overdone it. I think there are a lot of causes that could be consolidated. I feel that, but I have the pleasure of begging for money. So,
have you seen actually Jewish organization and Jewish philanthropy being organized differently in other countries? You mentioned the U.S. Are there any other big differences you've seen?
In the U.S., the federation model is certainly under stress because people want to choose. But in general, the New York Federation, which raises, it's a huge pie. Forget how much it raises. A lot of money. It gives to teacher training, summer camps, the disabled, poverty, Israel, Russian resettlement. So it is across the spectrum. Whereas here, it just doesn't exist. I can't comment on other diaspora communities.
Great. So I'd love to open to more questions from the crowd. Yes?
My question is a blend between bill number 1 and number 2. How about real estate investments in Israel?
By the time one of those deals comes to us, if all of those sharpshooters haven't done it, what Metzia am I going to find? That's the issue. There are some extremely talented, smart, successful, connected Israelis. Now, if one of them came to me and said, look, the deal's too big, there's enough capital there. It's a small country. They don't need me. I can't add value there. And there's no other exit than the local market, right? There's no foreign money, institutional money, right? Axe is not buying real estate. CalPERS isn't buying real estate. And we like to think that the exit is an institute. A German open-ended fund is not buying. So these are the people that we sell to. And yeah, you would have the local Israeli institutions, but I don't want to be at the mercy of the locals, because then I've got nowhere else to go.
On the residential sphere, you have the Empire.
You have the Empire. But there are so many good apartment developers in Israel that, but I'd love my own place.
More questions?
I was a bit late, so maybe I missed it.
We'll start from the beginning.
Sorry. You talked about leadership and your management style. and you said that you're very much about metrics driven, make sure people get what they need to do, and that you're not very much in favor of cowboys.
Right.
How do you handle a scenario where you've got somebody that likes to do things their own way, they're delivering the end results, they're bringing you the money, they're bringing you the deals, bringing great return on investment, but the way they go about their business is not necessarily the most, not in line with kind of your vision of how you want your staff to carry themselves, or not very kosher sometimes. How do you manage somebody who's very successful but has a bit of a cowboy mentality?
Time catches up, because something will go wrong. Something always goes wrong. You know, and you know, I think every Monday, we haven't ever had that problem. Just because the culture is reinforcing. And if we did have that, the problem is when there are separate rules for people, it's not good for morale. And I'd have to weigh very heavily whether their economic contribution justified. Everybody should be treated, one rule book for everybody.
You will let that person go.
Well, I'm not sure that person would get far. I think because if they did one deal their way, we'd say fine. If they did two deals their way, we say, but you know, we've got this investment committee. We have these things called memos. They have what you call spreadsheet analysis and appendices and exhibits. I don't think it would get that far. I don't think it would get that far. I mean, I have some, it chafes. It chafes. It's best not to do it.
Has there been a single event or experience or maybe period of time, tutelage from an individual that you feel has really shaped you as a person and perhaps sort of shaped your career?
A business event.
Yeah. Or perhaps over a period of time during your career?
Well, I think that recessions are very instructive. So in the late 80s, early 90s, when the U.S. was crashing, you know, and I had made loans which went bad, and you see what happens. You learn a lot about that, and we've learned a lot from from Lehman Brothers today. So I think you learn more, right? Adversity introduces a man to himself, a person to himself. But when I first came over here and raised a fund, it was very difficult because we were a new manager. We had been investing in Europe, but we didn't have a brand. And it took us a long time to raise a fund. So capital was scarce. And we really were, our underwriting, we made sure. Because what we did is we sort of raised 150 million and then we stalled. But we started to buy. And we knew everything we bought was really going to be the marketing for the next. So the discipline was very, very good. And that was instructive. That was sort of the formative experience. One of the ways to make money is to act like you don't have it. Because in real estate, right, you really have to squeeze the corners. So we bought a site in Fulham. We backed a group. And we had planning consent for, call it 100,000 square feet of saleable area. And because these guys are really good, right? They're really good. Just by tinkering with the design and optimizing, they picked up another 10,000 saleable. Well, 10,000 saleable at £1 million a foot with an incremental build cost of 150 pounds a foot. That's real money. And that's just squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. And when you get big, you don't, it's always this trade-off. Everything, you could argue both sides of everything, right? Do you go for margin or do you go for volume? Because some of the people who really have made money, the people we should emulate, have only done one or two things at a time. Gerald Ronson, I have the privilege of being a partner with Gerald Ronson. He is not distracted by the latest deal. He is not a deal junkie. He doesn't like to buy because he doesn't think anyone else is a good builder. But he squeezes the value out of everything. And it's focus and attention to detail. If any of you know Manhattan, the best office address is 9 West 57th Street. It's called the Solo Building, owned by a guy named Solo. He ain't getting the Mother Teresa Award. This is not a nice guy. But he owns this one building and some other things, and it is his life. And it's the best. It's $150 a foot. So there's something to be said for that, but definitely squeeze. Do not be a deal junkie. Deal junkies get killed.
I'll ask a question before I get from the crowd. What is your favorite deal that you did in your career? The one you're most proud of?
Well, I think that they well, the thing that stands out, and I think credit really goes to Leo Noe, but we bought a shopping center in Middlesbrough, which, if anyone's from Middlesbrough, apologies. It's not the garden spot of the world, but it was the leading shopping center. And we paid £92 million for it, and we bought it from Legal & General in 2002. Now, this was naughty. We borrowed $89 million. This was naughty, but we sold it for $135. But extended leases, put new tenants in, created new rental evidence, and rose a rising market. And it was just a stunning deal. I mean, it just, everything went right, and that sort of stands out. But you couldn't do that again.
Yeah.
You couldn't. I mean, it was the financing is it's obscene. Don't do this at home without a licensed professional.
12 times money.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, actually, the best deal we ever did as a firm in Europe. The best deal. Fair question. Metro, the big German retailer, went into Poland in the 90s because it was its backyard after the fall of communism. And there was no local real estate development community. So they built their own shopping centers to be anchored by their brands. Real, the Electronics Media Markt, and Praktiker, the home DIY. And they assembled a portfolio, let's say it was worth 750 million euros. And then they realized, oh, we own a lot of real estate. We borrowed to do this. We've got to delever. We've got to put the money back into our core business. So we negotiated 4 years sale-leaseback on the entire portfolio. 20-year lease guaranteed by the parent with rental uplifts. We bought it. We closed the day Poland entered the EU. We paid 8.75% yield. We did a refinance because after 2 years, the income grew through indexation. We refinanced, and then we sold a 50% interest for 6%. So we've had a lot of our money out. We still own it. Real has just been replaced with Auchan, so the credit has improved. The footfall will increase, and I think we will have another. We're sitting on substantial gains, but it's the gift that keeps giving because it was the right structure. It's the right real estate with the right refinancing, with the right lease. But Metro, right, they pay us rent, but they collect rent from all the inline tenants. And they're collecting more rent than they're paying, but the lease is getting shorter. So that reversion will come to us. So it's just appreciating as time goes by. That was a fun deal.
Alan mentioned right at the very beginning about the three bills. I sort of like that, sort of nice sound. Family man, businessman, and the community man.
If I don't get home soon, I may only be 2 bills.
Just to give you a chance to give some insight. Obviously, the question was asked before in terms of balance. Is there a bill that, on a general basis, takes a priority over the others? Is there a real bill?
Well, that's first of all, God willing, we all live long. So balance isn't always simultaneous. Sometimes it's sequential. So there are times in one's life where you just work.